Okay, so call to order of this meeting. Thank you very much. So, starting off the first point, roll call. Is the sheet currently going around? Great, thank you very much. So that takes us to approval of the agenda. So to begin, has everybody been able to check the Facebook group for the most updated agenda for tonight's meeting? If not, please raise your hands, but generally it's going to be the same. I will say that there have been some points that were changed from the original agenda that was sent out. There was a point on policy regarding the IEAC, affiliate groups, and your recommendation from the Fund Committee regarding Special Bylaw 1, which was deferred to the Policy Committee. A point that was raised by Rami about student space is also been referred to the Policy Committee, and also open to other amendments of the agenda. So if there are no further, yeah.
I was just going to say the student space actually has to be deferred to collecting space committee.
Oh, I'm sorry, I said policy committee. Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chair, as mentioned, I would like to pull out the policy committee and the appointments committee out of the consent agenda.
I'm sorry, can you speak up, please?
As mentioned earlier, I would like to pull out of the consent agenda policy committee and appointments committee, please.
Okay, thank you. So we need a seconder for that. Ben? Okay, great. Thank you. So we can put that under new substantive business.
I'm sorry?
Those points can be put under new substantive business.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can you remind me of those points, please? Which two were they?
Policy, appointments.
Thank you. Yes, Ben and then Terry.
I was just going to suggest that we move the, which one would it be? I guess the policy committee report up to the top of the agenda as high as it could go, just because I'm assuming that that's why the Model UN people are here, so it might make sense to not have them sit through the entire meeting if possible. And then have to.
Okay, so the offer is to place it where on the agenda then? So the...
I mean, we have different guests that are here, so we have the judicial board applicants as well, and then we have, I mean, maybe under, it's a little unorthodox, but maybe under the presentations, or I don't know, it's kind of weird, but I just don't want to have to keep people here longer than we need to. So where
right.
we just, yeah.
So you'd say in between, you'd want to put it on presentations and guest speakers?
Either that or returning business, I guess, which is also higher, if I'm not mistaken, than where we currently have it.
Yeah, we could put it on returning business.
Sure.
Okay, Terry, you?
I just wanted to clarify if we're pulling all the reports from appointments and all the reports from policy, or if it's just specific.
Nikki, would you like to respond to that?
I would love to debate the Model UN fee levy request issue on council and kind of basically just say general appointments motion in general.
If I understand correctly, for policy, that would be for the Model UN, and then appointments, is this
Yeah.
general appointments?
Yeah.
Are there any other proposed amendments to the agenda? Ben?
I just want to move to approve the agenda, and then can I motivate afterwards?
Beg your pardon?
I want to move to approve the agenda,
Okay, sure.
but then,
Sorry, have you finished your point?
yeah, I just want to motivate after as well.
Oh, okay, well, let's second it so you can motivate.
Okay, I just wanted to, the motivation is really, we just need to approve it with 3/4 majority because a bunch of stuff was changed at the last second substantially. So things were added that weren't on the original agenda, and in our regular says we have to use, it has to be 3/4 approved. I'm sure it will be, I'm just pointing it out, but yeah.
Thanks. Paul, did you want to speak? Okay. Okay, if there are no further amendments to the agenda, all those in favor of approving the agenda as it stands? Abstentions? Okay, that carries. The agenda as it stands. So our first point is the approval of the consent agenda. We've already pulled 2 items from it. So in that case, with nothing else pulled, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda as it stands? Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. It carries, which approves the consent agenda. So in that case, the next point on the agenda will be the presentations and guest speakers. I had the point co-curricular record, and Charles, this is your point.
It was entitled Co-curricular Record, and we have Paul from the Student's Office just making a quick presentation
Okay.
for council. That's it.
Great. Paul, the floor is yours.
So as I said, my name is Paul. I work with the Dean of Students Office, and I just want to talk to you briefly about a program that we started last year called the Co-curricular Record. Basically what that program is it's a way to have all of this great stuff that you're doing in council, sitting on Senate, and so on, recognized on an official Concordia document. Essentially what it is it's accessed through your My Concordia portal, and you can go on there and add activities directly on there. At this point, not everything that is within the university is obviously on there, but there is the option to add activities that you don't necessarily have that are on there. I would encourage you to check it out, even use it, because it's a great document that shows not only what you did, but some of the skills that you learned from it. So whether you're applying for maybe some grad school applications afterwards, even grants funding, and even also job applications, is a great supplement to kind of show off the things you've learned, show off all the great stuff that you've done, and really sort of help yourself stand out. It's pretty simple to use. Our website, the deanstudents.concordia.ca, has a page that has all the information, guides how to use it, etc. So I just wanted to sort of let you know about that tonight, and basically, if you haven't heard about it already, take a look at it, and if you want to use it, go ahead. It's obviously voluntary, it's not required, but we'd love to have your help in building this thing up and getting it more known across the university and more widely used. Currently, right now, I'm working with some people in the GSA to try and get it more recognized in the higher levels of the university. So yeah, it would be great if you had a lot of the undergraduate groups working with us on that as well. You can always reach me on our website again, that's where my contact information is. Unfortunately, we're running out of business cards today at a meeting, so I don't have anything to draw quick for you. And that's pretty much it about the co-curricular record. One other thing I also did really want to mention quickly is just about our office in general. Part of what our office does is not only to help groups register in that, it's to actually support people on student life initiatives and goals and programs. So if you guys ever wanted to have some sort of issue brought up, or you weren't sure about university policy regarding something, our office, it's our job to help you understand that policy and work with you through anything that you're doing. And I would strongly encourage you to come visit us, talk to us, and ask about those things, because we can actually really help you move forward with it. Like, it's not our job to say one way or the other, it's just, this is what we need, and you tell us what we need, you need, and we'll go ahead and help you get that all sorted out. And I guess that's pretty much it. It's really quick. I know you guys have long meetings, so I don't know if you have any questions about anything. If you are more than happy to answer them. And if not, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Before we move on, would anybody have any questions they'd like for Paul? Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to point F on the agenda, appointments, meeting with judicial board appointments, the only point. Gabe, I believe this is your point.
Yeah, I actually have to move into closed session to do the JV interviews. So, but before we do that, I would just like to let anyone know that's interviewing for the judicial board to just, I'm gonna go outside so you can come talk to me if you have any questions. I'll let you know how it's gonna work with the interviews. So, yeah. So I guess. Yeah, there's chairs out there. So I guess I can't move to go to closed session now, so if someone else moves to go into closed session.
Yeah, sure. So Charles,
Move to go into closed session.
You can leave your stuff here too.
all those in favor of going to closed session, please raise your placards. Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll now be moving into closed session. Charles, would you like to speak to that first? Because it's going to involve suspending Robert's Rules of Order so that it can address the point of excusables.
All right, so Kate isn't here. She fainted before and hit her head against the wall. And anyway, she said she could come, but anyway, like, moved over to go home and rest up because it wasn't that great, the injury. So hopefully get her excused. I think we'd have to go into break Robert's rules, add something to the agenda, talk about it really quickly, and also deal with other excuses. And there's more of them.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So yeah.
You just start our school?
No, I have not.
Okay, is there a seconder? Michael? All those in favor of suspending Robert's Rules of Order for the point of excusals? Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, that carries. Great, so beginning with the point of excusals, we'll begin with Kate, which was just discussed. So in the case of an executive, we have to vote to excuse her and also to waive the fee associated with missing a regular meeting. So all those in favor of excusing and waiving the fees for Kate, please raise the placards. Those opposed? Abstentions? Great, that carries. So I also have some excusals from counselors. Specifically, I've got Caroline who sent her regrets, saying that she is home with fever. So I think it best that I rest and get rid of it. That was for Caroline. So all those in favor of excusing Caroline? Yeah, sure.
Do we need to have a motion on the table for this, or can we just approve
Well,
as
we
is?
dropped Robert's rules, right? So.
I said nothing.
Yeah.
I said no.
Thank you.
I'm getting back into it.
Okay. So, unless anyone has any questions, all those in favor of excusing Caroline, please raise your fingers.
So for information, which faculty is she from?
What's that?
Which faculty is she from?
Which faculty is Caroline from?
Janice speak.
Jim. Those opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, and lastly, there is Terry. I have a message from him saying I will have to be absent for this meeting because I will be in Atlanta for a hip hop festival, which I've been planning for the past 3 months. I know this would technically make it my third absence from the meeting. However, I strongly wish this doesn't penalize me or my seat of council in any way. Sincerely, Terry. So, unless there are any questions, is that a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that he missed the first meeting because he wasn't aware of it, because we had a hard time communicating with him. So, yeah. Also, if I'm not mistaken, he himself is a hip hop artist as well. So it's not just like a casual thing. Like it's like what he does, which is I think relevant to the discussion too.
Okay, thank you. Is that a question?
Yeah, point of clarification is, I'm pretty sure he's only missed, this would be a second meeting that he's missed. Like, because special council meetings don't count.
Yeah, I'm also under the impression he's
Yeah.
counting a special council meeting in absence.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of excusing Terry, please raise your placards. Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, great. And lastly, this was an error on my part, but for the last regular meeting, Paul, you had sent your regret saying that you weren't able to attend, and this was not actually noted in the minutes. So I'd like to suggest a motion to retroactively excuse Paul from the last regularly scheduled council meeting.
Can I speak?
Sure, definitely.
I don't recommend anyone excusing me. I just took time off. It's not worth being excused for. Thanks, Matt.
In that case, I can subtract that motion if you don't choose to.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, that does it for excusal. So I need a motion to move back into Robert's Rules of Order. Michael, seconded by Lucy. Those in favor of reinstating Robert's Rules of Order? Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that carries, which brings us back to the regular agenda. We're on the first point of returning business, which is policy model UN. Vicky, it was you that extracted this from the consent agenda, so the floor is yours.
First of all, the kind of president and the kind of like vice president of kind of like this kind of like group are presidents. So basically, I would like to ask council permission for them to be allowed to speak, to basically represent all of their members. If I can motion that.
I'm sorry, I really didn't.
I would like to motion to allow Nathanael Dagane and Alexa Chabot to be
Granted
to
speaking
basically
rights.
yeah, that's it.
May I be permitted to
Speaking
rephrase?
rights? That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, unless they're not CSU members, they do have speaking rights. Are the other two people present? And are you currently CSU members? Okay, then you definitely have speaking rights as members of the CSU. So Vicky, I would recommend them to not create that redundant motion because they already have speaking rights. Okay. Ben, I'd be next on the speakers list. Give it one person.
Can everybody just please speak up?
Thank you. Ben?
I would like to move to send this new document back to policy committee.
Okay, so there's a motion to return this point to the policy committee for further examination. Is that seconded or?
No, not at all.
Okay. We have a seconder, however, seconded by Matthew. So would you care to motivate?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say, obviously, you guys have a lot of energy. This is the kind of thing that I think the union should be encouraging and things like that. So, I mean, that's a good thing, obviously, because things don't get done unless people have a lot of energy. So I just want to start the conversation out that way.
If I could just remind you to speak a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying that obviously they have a lot of energy, and that's something to be encouraged. Obviously, like we should be encouraging students that are kind of moving things forward. But you know, I attended the committee meeting where this was discussed, where this issue was discussed, and I don't agree that this document is actually an accurate representation of what happened. I can appreciate that it's obviously a very sensitive thing for both of you and the people that are involved in this thing, because obviously there's been a lot of work that's put into it. But I did note that the typing stopped at certain points, and the way that this meaning that not everything was recorded, that's kind of very evident in this discussion right here. So, like this 5-page document, which, you know, I've only read the first page of it so far because obviously this is a lot to read, and we've been at a meeting, so there's not a lot of time for us to look over this here. But on the first page, I can already see that there's a pretty big discrepancy between what was discussed at the meeting. And I myself really didn't say anything at this meeting. I was there to observe and listen. But I mean, just to go into one point really quickly, and there are quite a few other discrepancies between what happened there. Where is this point? It says, anyways, there's a point on it that explains that you're going to have your annual general meeting at a certain point in the year. The reason why that was touched on, or at least one of the major reasons why that was touched on, is because and that's where you're going to have your directors elected, right? And so that was touched on specifically because then there was another point, if I'm not mistaken, that said in February you also have elections as well. So this was actually quite confusing, admittedly. And then the answer, which wasn't itself in the document to that question, was, well, you know, actually some people are there for 2 years, other people are there for 1 year. And you know, that wasn't in there, right? So it was a legitimate question. There are 2 different election periods, which doesn't actually, it's not addressing here at all that was one of the concerns. You know, I actually thought that the meeting was very collegial. You know, the reason why there was so much input given to both of you at the meeting and your partner there was actually because it was really obvious that you were asking for input. It's not our place to meddle heavily in these affairs, which definitely wasn't the intention of anybody there. And I know that the committee definitely was sensitive to that. It's very, the way that they were hesitant to make certain recommendations and things like that is evident of the fact that they shouldn't be meddling that much in it. It's our responsibility to uphold certain kind of pillar areas of the Constitution, but not to kind of nitpick and micromanage everything. So we have a world of new information here, this document, with a number of claims that are in it. I think that, I mean, we don't even know if we're going to be having by-elections or anything like that too, but I think that what we should do is send this document now back and take a look at it in a setting where, like, this is not a very good space to be looking at a document like this. There's 35 people sitting around the room. I think it needs to be looked at once more by the committee, which is actually supposed to go through these things, now that there's a world of new information that's being added. So, I mean, I was the one who actually mentioned that you could come to council and things like that in the judicial board, which will still be the case. You can still come back to council afterwards. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks. The judicial board process is very quick, so if you wanted to take that recourse, that's also an option. But I do think that that this is too much information for us to look at here. So I do think that we should go back and take a look at it. Maybe we made some mistakes. It's totally possible. Like everybody here, you know, we do what we can. Not everybody. We don't have unlimited information. So I think that it would be in good faith to send this back to committee, and then maybe the committee itself could produce a rebuttal if that's necessary, or maybe make a different decision. I don't really know, but I just think that that would be a prudent course of action.
Thank you. I've got speakers list going, starting with James.
I'd like to start with a request for information. What is the exact title of this agenda point?
The title as it was given when it was taken from the consent agenda is Policy, brackets Model UN.
Okay.
Okay, next slide, Marcus.
No, that was a request for information.
Oh, I see. That's aside from
the
okay.
just
Yeah,
now.
go for it.
Just to answer one point that Ben made that I realize is not as clear as it could be in a lot of constitutions, both within clubs of the CSU and other student groups. An AGM and your elections can take place at different times if your AGM is not necessarily appointing your directors. A lot of clubs do that too. They'll hold their annual general meeting, but they'll hold their elections at a different time or even a different month, as the CSU would hold theirs at different times. I read the policy report dated October 2nd, which is, I believe, the meeting that took place, and it's a page long. It explains how Model UN was invited to discuss the Constitution, and then how the meeting was collegial, which is very important, and then discusses that the Constitution reviewed by policy was unfit and must be reworked before it can be considered a feasible document that council can then deliberate over. It doesn't state that it doesn't state exactly what is wrong with the document, where the problems lie, and what needs to be changed in that, which I found problematic. As policy committee, if you're going through the nitpicking, as apparently was the case with reference through this, there should be some alternatives offered. I reviewed a few bylaws of clubs under the CSU, and they're exactly the same way. Most of the time, the first draft is awful, and there are points that are glaringly incorrect and don't really make sense, and some are just a little off and need some slight adjustments. Most of the time, if you go over it, edit it either with the person or on your own, and then email them certain problematic points and edits, they will review it, take that into consideration, and make the changes. And I don't think that was done through the policy committee, through no fault of their own. I know there's like 4 reports here. There's a lot of stuff on the table too. But it is sad to see a student organization that's been around for a good amount of time, has had success in the past 2 years, and actually international success in the last 2 years, and done pretty well for themselves, coming to the CSU in this way and not really getting some solid feedback. I know we had a similar problem last year. The policy committee didn't have enough time to be reviewing the CFC's constitution at the time. It had been a very difficult and long period at the CSU, and the executive in charge and chairing that committee didn't have as much time as he would have liked to. But in the end, we did bring it forward and we had that conversation. What I see problematic is reading through this document, which I did while we were on pizza break, is there seemed to be either issue, particularly with how the organization is structured in this constitution, or the long legalese jargon that is in these paragraphs. And reading it through, it seems to make sense. I have no degree in law, and nor do I ever hope to, but if it is taken out of the Quebec Companies Act, that's great and it's valid. If it's not to be included, the Quebec Companies Act still applies to this organization. But I feel like we're nitpicking on points that we have no right to be doing. And the same thing happened with the CFC last year. People were either in disagreement about the deadline of the organization's submission, or what the organization did, or what they represented, or a slew of ideas and points that they thought were valid. And the point that changed my opinion on that at that council meeting that I remember was October 9th, was last year's VP Academics stating very clearly, we have no right to go through this constitution and say if we agree with it or not, and if it makes sense. according to our values and our judgments or not. Is this document legal? Does it stand? Does it make sense? Could you put this into a room, have someone read it, and not get into shit at the end of the day within the province of Quebec? If so, then the document goes to the membership to be decided on. As it stands and having read through it, I would personally not vote for it because there are things that I'm uncomfortable with in this constitution. But it's up to the organization who's running a referendum question for a fee levy group to promote themselves and argue the points that are in their constitution. And if there's another group that wants to go against it, by all means. I'm not in agreement with what this constitution states at this time, but it is a constitution that is valid in and of itself. If there are specific points that are invalid or not legal in this province or within the university's policies, we should take a look at them and adjust them, but that should have been done at policy committee specifically. And Grant.
Thank you for your points. But just to maybe contextualize for you and everybody else, was this in response to the motion on the table now, which is to return to the policy committee? Okay, great.
Yeah. I just have a point of information. I'm not sure, was the actual constitution circulated to everybody, or is it, okay. It's not circulated to everybody, I just wanted to clarify. Okay.
We've got a pretty long speakers list, starting with Marcus.
Yeah, I'd just like to start by saying that I agree with a lot of what James was saying. It's valid. Like, no one else's documents should be subject to anyone's values. It should just be scrutinized through our policies and through legal matters, etc. But I also largely agree with what Ben was saying because I'm very unfamiliar with this issue. I didn't get a huge chance to overlook it, and this is a 5-page document that essentially I'd be using as a major reference for any decision that would be on the table at council. So I would prefer to have more time to actually understand the issue, talk to people, read this up, and internalize it before making a decision. As of right now, I feel it would be not in my best, well, not in our best interest to jump to a decision.
Thank you. Vicky, I had you next.
Yes, I just want to start by kind of like saying that I wholeheartedly support Conum application. I believe that they deserve to have this fee levy. In terms of the nitty-gritty details of this kind of constitution, first of all, these are all legally valid in Quebec. These guys have spoken with a Quebec lawyer about it, and I trust his or her professional opinion about the legal validity of it. In terms of like the rest, the kind of like only issue is that if basically this is sent back to the policy committee, would Commune have basically enough time to be onto the ballot onto the November by-election if we decide to have it? That is one of the major issue I have here.
Thank you. Terry, I had you next.
Okay, thank you. I agree with what some of the things that James has said, but at the same time, I don't agree with everything. In terms of outlining what some of our concerns were, if you look at like a subsequent report, I believe it's the 18th, we outlined, not in extreme specificity, but just general concerns that we had. So obviously when we had the meeting with Common, the majority of the discussion revolved around the concepts that we saw as inconsistent. And from my understanding of what took place last year, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't on council last year, but we do have access to the documents from years previous. The role of policy committee in the application of fee levy groups is exactly to look through the Constitution and adjudicate on whether or not the Constitution is one that the organization can function under. That's specifically the role of policy committee. And that's exactly what took place, as was discussed on October 16th of last year. So I would just like to clarify what the role of policy committee is. And in addition to that, the role of council in this process is to vote on whether or not this application should be put to ballot. The jurisdiction that policy has is not on allowing this to go to ballot or not. It's to make, it's to review and approve and make recommendation to the application as outlined in the standing regulations. One more thing I would just like to add is that we're fully aware that the Constitution is not the only document that an organization will function under, and it states it within the application outlines in terms of guidelines on what to submit, that the group can submit their constitution and regulations. But it's explicit, it's written right there, it's required. The application must contain the group's constitution and regulations. So when I don't receive, or when policy committee, which I chair, does not receive a set of regulations alongside with the constitution, we have to act as if the Constitution is the guiding document that's strictly determining the parameters of behavior of actors within the organization. So I feel that the work of policy committee was fair. I'd just like to echo the point that Ben made, that we were invited to provide recommendations by the attendees of the meeting. So I'm speaking about the officers responsible of Conman. The discussion we had, I thought, was very collaborative and informative for the both of us. It seems like following the submission, there were some specifics that were clarified, which allowed for the Constitution to be looked at upon our review. So that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. Lucy? Maintaining gender parity. Okay, for sure. Okay, so Matthew, go ahead.
So I agree with a lot of what Terry said, and probably most of what he agreed with what James said. Yeah, when it comes to what policy committee's exact job to do, just to reiterate a few points from Terry, if it is purely on this legal basis, then we would just need lawyers to look at it. But when it came to looking at the regulations and looking at what the Constitution exactly had, things that may have prevented the full and sufficient operation of this organization would have been the lack of detail and the inconsistencies that we saw within what each role within the organization really is, and we think that is definitely enough to impede a successful operation of an organization when titles are being used interchangeably but not clearly, not specifically defined, that they would be used synonymously or something. So I think that policy committee did do its job properly, insofar as we looked at how successful this, or like how this Constitution might be able to actually operate. And yeah, just with regards to this document that was submitted beforehand, I think it is important that we look it over and do have time for this. I mean, do have time to take into consideration a lot of this, because it seems like a lot of things that were said so far, I'm through about half of it, aren't exactly fair reconstructions of the issues that we pointed out, or actually points that we didn't point out at all. So as for straw manning, I think that's pretty clear in this document. It definitely needs some time and some clarification.
Will this vote to be added to the speakers list?
You'd like to be in? Okay, sure. Your names are?
Nate, Nathaniel, and Alex.
I'm sorry, the second name, could you repeat?
Alex.
Alex. Thank you. I have Michael next on the list.
Thanks, man. So I just want to reiterate a couple of things, and I'd like to first ask for a point of clarification. I believe Model UN is asking for a fee levy for if we were to have fall by-elections. If this were to be sent back to policy committee, would the group have enough time to go to policy committee, work with them, return to council, and pass it on the ballot?
That's a question. Would somebody like to respond directly to that? Somebody on policy committee, Bruce, would you like to?
From what I understand, they would not, because the deadline that they would have to meet, it's for the documents as is.
Okay.
So if it was changed or if it was edited, that would not count as the original document submitted. So no.
And it's, sorry, Matt?
Was that your point of information and now you'd like to make a...
Yeah, sorry, like I just have a couple of back and forth questions, that's okay, just specifically so that I can understand the timing situation. And is that in the standing regs? I believe it's in the standing regs, not the bylaws, right? So let's say this does go back to policy committee for better input. Could it possibly be not withstood at the next council meeting?
So could you repeat that?
Yeah.
Yes?
Can you, like, the notwithstanding clause can apply to standing regulation 241. That's not a
Okay,
problem.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And now I'd like to use my speaking privilege.
Okay, well, do you want a direct response then
Yeah.
first? Okay, sure.
The notwithstanding clause takes 2/3. Putting this to ballot takes 2/3. So regardless of it, it's really unchanged. It's going to take 2/3. So it's totally within.
Okay, cool. Okay, so then I guess I'll just speak to what everybody's been saying without repeating it too much. I definitely agree with what Terry's saying in terms of providing more input, because I agree that certain things are unclear for sure. However, I would agree with James in saying that yes, it's policies committee to it's the committee's role to go through all this for sure. But at the same time, I was going through this, and if they did indeed get consultation from a lawyer, then it is legal. I'm not a lawyer. Nobody here is a lawyer. James has made that explicitly clear. But if this is legal, then I don't think we as a council should be overruling something that a non-fee levy group is doing. Having been following their progress, Model UN is doing a fantastic job, and the only thing holding them back is money, which for me is a silly reason not to further their success. So if this is legal, and if there's no illegalities in it, then this should be brought to the membership, not to 20 people around this table. That's my choice.
Thank you.
Yes. What proof do we have that this has been reviewed by a lawyer or by a legal advisor or something? And can someone?
Well,
does somebody want to speak to the evidence that this has been reviewed by a lawyer?
May I recommend passing it to the officers?
Do you feel kind of a response? Sure.
As of now, we cannot provide proof. I can't provide any physical proof. However, I have been authorized by the lawyer in question to use his name. His name is Patrice Blais, who actually has been involved with formulating this.
10 years of experience in not-for-profit law.
And maybe we can ask him to write a letter. Who knows? But we can ask him if he would like to provide that evidence.
Thank you. Paul, I had you next on the speakers list.
I have a question before I get to my speech or whatever. The question is, how long does a group have to have as a deadline to submit the documents to be passed to us?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, Terry, direct response.
Okay. That was our first deliberation at policy committee on September 15th. So if you read the policy report on September 15th, it'll describe that outline to you.
You said you were going to answer my question.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if you want me to read the regulation, it says the approval policy committee for review and approval at least 2 months before the first day of the nomination period of the fall by-elections.
That's August 28th.
Great.
Great.
So it seems to me like a group, assuming I've read CSU bylaws and standing regulations, you usually have 2 months to hash out the issues in a constitution and whatnot. So question is, did this group meet the 2-month deadline? Which I guess doesn't make sense because we don't have by-elections yet. But the question is, I guess, two questions. When did they submit all their required documents? Second question is, did policy review provide a report to this group so they could reference it?
Yes, please, or can I respond?
Lucy also wanted to direct response. Yeah.
Yeah. If you read the September 15th policy report, it'll clarify that. They submitted their documentation fully on September 12th. If you just read the documents there, it'll outline it for you.
Great. And the second question was, did policy provide them with a report outlining their recommendations? Question. What did policy provide them?
I don't understand.
What did policy review provide
Could you repeat that question?
The meeting.
I mean, never mind.
Oh, the meeting took place on.
Sorry, what policy committee provides Hodman as feedback from that meeting? Nothing, it was just like a one-on-one meeting and that was it? Nothing was written up? Those minutes are all that we have?
Well, that's the question. Lucy or Terry, someone from the policy committee for a response? Terry?
Okay, so we met with Conman, the officers responsible, on, I believe it was October 2nd. And we provided feedback to them in person. And we told them what policy committee's decision was going to be on, in terms of our recommendation as to whether their constitution was sound or unsound, functionable or not functionable.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I believe those were all points of information. Paul, do you
Yes.
still have speak point?
Man,
Okay, Lucy, I have you next.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to add context, you know, this isn't really a recommendation that policy committee would make if policy committee didn't have concerns. I mean, for context, I've signed the petition for them to go forward. I think MOLUN is an awesome group. I think they deserve more funding than they've been getting. I can speak to my credentials as former ambassador for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia back in like a conference in Den Haag a few years ago. No, it's a great initiative, but I mean, it speaks to the unease that we had as a committee. Like for me, I wasn't at the meeting with them. I had another thing, but I agreed with my colleagues' notes that yeah, like the Constitution just has inconsistencies where, you know, considering that this is what we're looking at, I wouldn't be comfortable putting that forward and having that as a backbone. But I mean, it wasn't an intent to nitpick. It's a great initiative. It's a good, and the Constitution does need work. But I mean, as this is what we were tasked to do, it is telling that all of us did not feel comfortable with this being like a document that is a backbone for an organization that gets voted on for student money.
Thank you very much. I had Nathaniel next. Okay, so basically to provide, thank you, Honorable Chair, for giving us a chance to speak. So as mentioned by Terry, on October 2nd, CSU Policy Committee invited members of Conmun, so Concordia Model to, because they had concerns about the document we submitted for the application. Our biggest surprise, our constitution, like we went there in a friendly initiative to have a discussion and see what were the concerns that the policy committee had. To our biggest surprise, what happened was a literal 2-hour meeting of trashing our constitution line by line, clause by clause, projected on the screen, which to my knowledge has never happened in years of CSU council meetings in the past. However, some of the recommendations that were provided by the CSU Policy Committee were really helpful, and we implemented them in the Constitution. And now I'd like to give my time to Alex.
Yeah.
Alex, you're next on the list anyway.
Of course, excellent. Thank you. So, a lot of the recommendations that the policy committee did give us, we did implement into our constitution, as shown in this document. However, you know, basically, our constitution has been reviewed and revised over and over again by Patrice Blais, who has been involved with the revision of a lot of the constitutions of the field groups here on campus. I mean, a lot has been said by by Paul and by James, by Michael, that basically what I wanted to say and the points that I did want to put forward. But like I said, if ever we do need to provide proof that it was reviewed by Patrice Blais, I do believe he is more than happy to provide that. He is an authority here at Concordia when it comes to these kinds of things, these kinds of constitutions, especially when it comes to not-for-profit organizations. So I do believe he'd be willing to provide that if that's what you guys do.
Point of order. I just believe there's a motion on the table as to whether we should send this document to policy committee or not. So maybe we can get back
We are
to
still
the
debating
actual motion.
So So you're calling for orders of the day? I mean, we have a speakers list on that point.
Yeah, but maybe we can have the discussion centered around whether this document should be sent to.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so to recontextualize a little bit of what I said after James's points originally is that we are discussing the submitting of this proposal to the policy committee for further evaluation, and just contextualize your responses to the remainder of the conversation in that point.
Point. We'll have to finish the speech, as we were just cut.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was under the impression that you had finished.
It's okay.
Okay, so you have no.
Yeah, I just want to give one person for the chair. No, guys. No, definitely continue your speech. It's just that during a speech, anybody can interrupt for certain kinds of actions. I'm sure you know. And anyways, that's all it was. It wasn't meant to cut you off. So please, I just want to say that you definitely should continue.
So what we wanted to actually bring to the attention of council, which was said before, actually, was there were nitpicky issues that we did go through line by line by line during the committee meeting. I'm not too sure exactly what was said there when there are things in this document that were not brought up in the meeting. Everything that was in the meeting is in this document. A lot of the major stuff that we wanted to bring to the attention of council are the major articles, especially Article 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, which were actually put there with the council of Patrice Blais himself. Those seem to be the really major problematic ones in our meeting, close to them in regards to liability and borrowing of money and whatnot. From our understanding and from the understanding of our legal counsel, like we said, these are rights that are enshrined, and these are rights that are given to not-for-profit organizations, which if we do become a fee levy group, we will be. And these are articles that were placed here by us and by Patrice Blais, just to make sure that it is enshrined in here, to make sure that there's no confusion in the future, and nothing can really come back to us in regards to the money, since it is student money.
Furthermore, I'd like to add a good point that since most of the clauses that were debated on the council.
Sorry, you can't just go back and forth.
Yeah, I would be tempted to just to contextualize. Generally, it's one person gets to speak to a point and then another. So I had Nathaniel and then Alex on the speakers list. Okay. So for it to bounce back to if you'd like to go, but again, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So who hasn't spoken before now is Mary.
Hi. So I just wanted to bring it back to the idea that when a group or a club comes forward with a constitution, it should be our job to kind of give friendly suggestions and be helpful, and I think that's exactly what happened on October 2nd. We were really trying to give insight into what we found was unclear. The context might have been intimidating. I can see how the screen might have been intimidating, but I think it was there so that we could all kind of follow around, and we just wanted to bring up ideas that we thought should be clarified. And what I also heard during that meeting was sometimes the people from Conlon were saying, oh yes, that's actually been changed since September 12th. Internally in our executive, we've actually clarified that. And so I think that there have been changes in their organization that wasn't reflected in the constitution that we have, which is kind of problematic if you're bringing it to a fee levy. And so we basically, in our consultation and our help with editing, we're saying we don't think this is ready. And so here's what we would suggest you would change for the next time. So I think that maybe people who don't have all the information about the context feel that policy wasn't doing enough follow-up with this group, but I really feel like we're trying to be helpful and suggest edits with this group in a friendly way. So I just wanted to...
Thank you. So on the speakers list, I have many people who would like to speak a second time. Is there anyone who would like to take the floor that has not yet spoken? If not, the first person to speak second. Oh, yeah, Heather.
I mean, I'm sorry, I just received this document because I guess I didn't get it when it was first circulated around. That's okay. Also, I mean, I'm still getting familiar with all of what it is that we do here, but I find it, I don't know, I find it very difficult for us to talk about this when, like, I haven't read this document and we haven't heard, I mean, we've heard some from policy. But anyways, all that being said, like, is this, if there's not like a complete time constraint on us to make this decision right now, and if the policy committee has been doing what they have been doing with the officers of the commune, then why is it such a problem for us to send this back to policy so that they can do their jobs with commune and then it can come back to our council meeting, which is in 2 weeks? It's just a question.
Yeah, thank you. So with no further new people, Rami's or Blackbird up? Okay. Yeah, you can be on the speakers list. You have not spoken yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I just call a question?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so the question called.
Move to call the question.
And the question is being currently called on Ben's proposal to send this point back to the policy committee. So is there a seconder? Thomas? Okay, those in favor of calling the question? Those opposed? And abstentions? Okay, that carries. The question's been called. So just to clarify for you folks, the question has not been called, which means that the speakers list will be canceled, and we're going to go to a vote on whether or not this is going to be returned to the policy committee for further evaluation. So all those in favor of returning the current topic and the discussion to the policy committee, please raise your placards. Those opposed?
Noted.
And abstentions? Okay, that carries. So the current item will be sent back to the policy committee for further evaluation. Sure, we've got some comments after the fact. Paul and James.
I'd like to make a motion stating that policy committee ensure that Conmon have an adequate constitution ready to be sent to fall by elections.
I second. I wholeheartedly second.
Could I just get a clarification on what that motion was, please?
Sure. So, motion that policy committee ensure that Conmon's constitution be ready for fall by elections.
Okay. I'm not sure on the substance of that motion.
That means that
how could they ensure that anything is prepared by the group?
So, it's been seconded, so I'll talk. So the point is that now that policy is back in charge of this constitution, and since I'm assuming again that a 2-month period that they have to submit is that 2 months of hashing out and making sure that the constitution is ready to be sent to policy, policy now have a deadline for fall by elections, so they're mandated by council to meet that deadline, so Conmon isn't hindered by this process. So I'm assuming you guys want to be on the ballot for fall by elections, so this motion will ensure that policy and them are working together to meet that deadline.
Can I just point of personal privilege or point of information?
Yeah, point of information.
Like there's some conflicting recommendations as to what policy committee should be doing. Like we're being told that we're nitpicking, and then we're being told that we should be working with Conmon, and I don't know how you work with them and make the constitution functional without going through it line by line. And just to make it very clear and abundantly so to everyone here, like the role of policy committee is not to write a constitution for Conmon. And I think that's what Conmon themselves are telling us. So I would just like to make it very clear that I don't think what Paul is putting to the table as a motion works with the role of policy committee in this general process.
So point of information, I guess, why is this going back to policy? What is the role of point of information of policy within this?
So from Terry, I got a point of clarification. I got a new point of information from Paul, but this is becoming a bit of a back and forth. So
still a point of information.
Sure, yeah. And your question is?
What is policy's role with Conmon's constitution now that Conmon's constitution has been sent to policy?
Okay, would someone from policy committee care to respond?
Do you mind since it was my motion, actually?
Pardon me?
Do you mind since it was my motion if I respond?
If you want to respond to that, sure.
Yeah, and then if somebody from policy wants to, of course, afterwards. Honestly, it's just to take this new information, which is a substantial discussion point, and then to discuss it further there. If there are valid points made, to consider that in the next recommendation. If there are not valid points made, to send it back to council. It's definitely not within the spirit of the motion in the first place to literally rewrite parts of their constitution.
Okay. James, I'd you next.
Did you not introduce a motion? No. He introduced a motion on his speaking privilege. You started your speakers list, if I'm not mistaken, and I wasn't on that.
That's true. Okay, fair
I
enough.
think there was
In that case, there was a new speakers list.
Point of clarification, what I'm trying to say is that the motion that Paul made derogates from, like, his amendment derogates from what we're initially trying to do with the initial motion that was just passed, right? But we just passed a motion to send this to policy committee for review, not send this to policy committee to ensure that comment has a workable constitution.
Yeah. So the question seems to be on the functioning then of the policy committee and to what degree this motion is going to be respecting the motion that we just voted on. Paul, do you have any commentary on that as far as Terry's point of clarification?
Yeah, sure. Technically, I guess I just don't see any problem with my motion as it stands. Policy's looking at it and is picking out articles that they think need to be adjusted. Conmon has a deadline. I'm just saying these deadlines should just be met together. And I'm giving the task of policy to ensure that this happens. I'm adding additional mandate to policy committee, which I'm assuming council is able to do.
Okay, I've got a point of clarification and also speakers is building up. I've got you on the speakers list.
I'm not clear as to what the actual deadline is. Like, is there a date, or does it just need to be ready for the day that the election actually happens? And are we I don't see how we can be obligated to make sure that their constitution functions. All we can do is make the recommendations, but it doesn't entail that they actually fulfill those recommendations. Or if they're not, I wouldn't even say recommendations, so we point to issues. But I'd just like to know exactly what this deadline is, because apparently, the deadline for actually submitting this stuff is way past. No, so I'd just like to know what this date is and this deadline is.
So that sounds like a question for you, Paul, given that is your motion. Which deadline were you referring to in your motion?
The start of the fall by-election nomination period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that conflicts with what it actually means for the day in which they submitted their constitution. It seems like there's a bit of conflict there, where they submit all their documents, but it also has to be, I don't know, maybe this will get clarified through this.
Okay, sure. Well, Michael, I've got you next, and then Ben.
We're not here to debate the purpose of the existence of policy committee. I'm sure policy committee is doing a very good job. However, I do strongly support Paul's motion. Again, policy should have a say in this because this is binding on the CSU. And I think policy committee is qualified enough to give good recommendations to a group that's really just trying to be legitimate. However, at the same time, I don't think Model UN should be hindered because of quote unquote bureaucracy. And by bureaucracy, I don't mean any disrespect. I just mean because of our policies, I don't want them to be hindered. If our by-elections happen on November 25th, then when the nomination period is sent out, that gives them at least a month. That's definitely enough time for them to go back to Patrice, to work with Terry and his committee, and really get a good working document that they could use to better represent their membership, and that we can use to further emphasize their legitimacy. So all this to say, I support Paul's motion. I don't want to add red tape to them, but I still want it to be done correctly, and I think Paul's motion is clear for that. Thank you.
Ben, after next, Mr. Clover.
I have a point of information. Sorry. Shit, I lost the point of information. Oh yeah, sorry. Is there debate if I were to move the table? I don't know if there's debate on that. Am I allowed to say why I would like to table, or I don't know? Is there any way we can check this? Because I don't know the answer. I forget what ND means on the back of this thing. I'm pretty sure it's a typo.
Yeah. Sorry, what's your question?
Second.
If there's...
ND means no debate.
No, there's debate.
No, second.
Okay, so okay. So then that's my point of information. So I'm not going to move the table now. However, whenever something like this is a fairly substantial task that's being put on the executive, and so I think it's only right that we now kind of make recommendations based on the availability of time within the next 2 weeks, essentially. And if we are to call by-elections, this is entirely new. This was not going to be something that was going to be happening until potentially today. because of resignations that happened today, and it's still not even a guarantee. However, if we are to call by-elections, there is a significant amount of work that the executive and policy committee will need to do for the CSU, let alone for a club, which we already do significant amounts of work for as a club and things like that. I think that this is definitely a bad motion and definitely not wise for a board of directors to instruct the executive to do, given that honestly, we have not been fully preparing for by-elections because there was nowhere near any indication that they were going to happen. And there is a lot of work that we would have to do before by-elections, so just please consider that. And hopefully somebody will call the question because our lawyer is here to speak at 9, and he's not cheap. So.
Thank you very much. So next on the list I have Chloe.
Ben put everything really nicely, so I'll just call the questions and we'll name this time as well.
There's a bit of a speaker's list, but you're more than happy.
I'll call the questions at 9 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, it is 9 o'clock sharp, so is there a second for calling the question? Okay, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, we'll definitely read the motion before. Sure, yeah.
The request for information is what work would be required of the executive for by-election?
We have quite a financial fiasco going on right now, and we need to try to see what we can do with these by-elections to try to amend that. So that's only one part of it, and there are other things that, like for projects that we work on. We literally have 2 weeks, and this is not the only thing that we do, right? So there's like a significantly.
The election don't do anything regarding elections.
I'm not sure you're talking about.
Okay, we're going to go back and forth now.
I'm sorry.
Executives have no say in the
So Paul, do you have anything? Paul? Paul?
I'm not talking. I'm not sure.
Okay, so you have no further,
No.
that answers your question? Okay, great. So the question has been called, it was seconded. If there's no further comments, then we can go to a vote. And once the motion is read.
Point of information, actually.
Yep.
How much is the fee levy request per credit?
Oh, is somebody comfortable answering that?
7 cents?
Correct, 7 cents.
We're fighting about 7 cents?
We're not fighting about anything.
Point of order, that is out of order. We're on a motion that's in the middle of a vote right now, so let the chair do the vote, and then we'll keep talking about this. Or something remotely in order.
James, we first need to reread the motion as it stands.
The reading of the motion was just that policy committee ensure that, policy committee ensure that Conmun's constitution be ready for the fall by-elections.
That is the motion as it stands. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your
Point of
hand.
order, Chloe moved to table that indefinitely. Did you not?
Call the
We'll
question.
call the question.
Yeah. So all those in favor of the motion as it stands?
I'm sorry?
Point of order.
The question. That was the question. We didn't vote on the calling of the question?
No.
I apologize. We're currently voting on the calling of the question. So all those in favor of calling the question? Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes. The question's been called. All those in favor of voting for the motion as it stands? Sure.
It's just that the policy committee ensure that Conmun's constitution be ready for the fall by-elections.
All those in favor?
Noted.
Those opposed? Abstentions? All right, that's defeated. So if there are no further motions, then that. Oh.
I was still on that speed as after Paul from like 15 minutes ago. We started this whole fiasco. If I can just very quickly, what I think Paul is trying to get at and communicating very poorly, no offense, was the fact that the policy committee should be drafting a document outlining an exhaustive list of problems with this constitution. Not fixing the problem, they don't have to do anything. But this line, what is this? What is here? What's wrong with this one? What's wrong with that? Literally line by line. Go through it. It takes the committee 3 hours, it takes the committee 3 hours. And email that written document to the students who are trying to get this proposal put in, so they can then review the issues policy committee has with the Constitution as a whole, adjust them as necessary, also using the clubs coordinator of the CSU, which conveniently they can because they're a CSU club, and is incredibly good at drafting policy and has drafted a number of constitutions in past years to work together to get a constitution ready and then bring it back. So I don't think, I didn't agree with Paul's motion because it was very abstract, but I would say that, I'm not going to move to do it, but I think policy committee should be taking a look at the document, coming out with a list of point by point what's wrong with it, sending that to the club's director of the CSU, who has all the time in the world to be doing this, and the executives of bottom line, so they can take a look and get it done. And then bring it back to us by the next council meeting, which is in 2 weeks, because we have 2 in October.
It's in 2 weeks.
I'm not going to move to do that, but that would be really, really appreciated.
Thank you, James. Next by Vicky.
Iverson.
All right, next with Charles.
Call for the orders of the day, please.
Okay, orders of the day. Does anyone have any especially pressing matter on this point? If not, we can move on to the next point, which is appointments.
Point of information.
Sure.
Can basically someone tell me can someone tell me the last possible day to call a fall by-election, please?
Can you speak to that?
The next council meeting, basically. Basically, that's the simple answer.
I call for the orders of the day. There's no discussion. It's chapter. It's concluded.
Well, I mean, it was a point of information, so.
Basically, the next council meeting.
Okay, so orders of the day have been called and there are no further points of information, then we can move on to, yes.
Any questions? Do you accept the orders of the day? If not, I'm going to put James's motion on the table.
As I understand it, James did not put a motion on the table.
Or whatever he suggested is what I will be motioning for.
Oh, I see, okay. Yeah, well then if orders of the day are not accepted, then it's.
You choose if you accept any councilor's orders of the day or not, and if you say you accept them, we move on to the next point. If not, we can keep talking about that point. That's where I think the confusion arose. I think Charles called for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe, I mean, Charles, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I believe you may call for orders of the day before the fact that the lawyer is here now. And
Well, that was one of the things.
yeah, that might be one of the many reasons. So yeah, I would accept orders of the day for the fact that we don't want to keep him waiting any longer.
Can we then just, sorry, request for information on point of order? Would be able to just have the lawyer speak first and then restrict to back those topics so we don't have to like this?
Point of order. That's not how orders of the day work. Sorry, like it's not. We can.
Yeah, I know.
suspend
That's why I
motions
asked
and
point
things
of
like
order
that.
to the chair.
Yeah.
If what are our options?
And yeah, are you asking?
Like, can we just table this after the lawyer's speech?
Is that a motion?
Direct response.
Or is that a question?
Can it be a motion?
If someone wants to respond to that.
Okay. Either way, if we address, if we have to speak with them, if we have a lawyer point right now, we're gonna have to break Robert's rules, get rid of them to move the lawyer point up. Or if we return to this after the lawyer presentation, we can also just add another. If we're breaking Robert's rules, we can add another point anyway.
So you're saying let me just
So
do it Robert's rules.
if we have the presentation and add a point after, that's up to council. So.
Thank you. I had a speakers list, so Marion, you're next.
Okay.
Okay, Jeremy? Okay.
Point of information. Is the CFS case not the next point?
No, it's appointments.
There was a second point taken from the consent agenda.
Okay, and I'd like to be on the speakers list. I'd just like to be on the speakers list then.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, there's no speakers list, so go ahead.
I move to table the next point until after the CFS point.
Okay, so there's a motion to move this point, which means to therefore suspend Robert's Rules of Order in order to move this point after the presentation for the CFS case. Yeah, there would have to be 2 points to be moved there because there's the appointments point and the points climate positions. Is that what you're proposing? So then it would come after the CFS case. Okay, great. That's the motion as it stands. Is there a seconder? Okay, sure. So motivation? Is that necessary, Ben?
The motivation is just that I'm here. This is the fastest course of action, and he's here. Yeah. So.
Yep, okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, okay, speakers list then, Paul and Chloe.
Sure. Can I also move to table the policy committee report topic to after the lawyer?
Is that an amendment?
Yeah, again, we were discussing that we'd be suspending Robert's rules to add the point. Do you want me to just suspend Robert's rules later?
We can do that after, yeah.
Cool, then forget it.
Okay, great. Chloe? Okay. Michael?
Call the question.
Okay, question's been called. Those in favor of calling the question? Or is there a second, right? Second? Okay. All those in favor of calling the question, please raise the placards. Opposed? Abstentions? Question's been called. So therefore, all those in favor of suspending Robert's Rules of Order in order to put this point, this policy model UN into the agenda after CFS case, after the lawyers got a chance to speak, please raise your placards.
That's not the motion.
That was not the motion?
The motion was to table the 2 points.
Table the next 2 points until after.
Table the 2 points until after the CFS case.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So the motion as it stands is to table the next 2 points until after the CFS case in order to be able to have the CFS presentation. So all those in favor?
Thank you.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so this point will be tabled. So,
I have another speakers list, please.
okay, sure. Go for it.
I just moved to go into closed session.
Motion to go into closed session. Seconder. Okay, all those in favor of going into closed session? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so we'll now be returning into closed session. So I'll ask those of you who are non-CSU members to please leave, and this includes CUTV. Let's take a moment to go into closed session. Are there any announcements?
I think we agreed, what's it called again, ratified the committee minutes, right? So I just wanted to say that for the Pleasant Space Committee, there's going to be some few minor changes that will have to be done. So just wanted to.
So you're announcing that there's going to be minor changes?
Well, there's going to be, we're going to be reviewing a couple of stuff at the next Pleasant Space Committee meeting on Friday.
Okay, that's the announcement.
Yeah, just that on.
Okay.
Announcement of what?
That we're gonna be reviewing a couple of stuff at the Clemson Space Committee meeting on Friday.
Well, stuff like?
Well, you could come to the meeting. I don't know. We're gonna because there's some budgets that we'll have.
Oh, okay.
I just have one information I sent out right after a closed session. Did we ever ratify the motions past the closed session?
Right, that was the point of change. Which motion are you referring to?
The 3 motions passed the day.
Yes, those were all voted on.
And then we ratified after we went into closed session.
Oh, procedurally speaking, yeah, true indeed, no, that was not done. And we're already in announcements. So I would need then to suspend Robert's rules in order to approve, or ratify rather, what was planned in closed session. Thank you, Chloe, for that. Terry?
Move to suspend the Robert's rules.
Seconded? Okay, those in favor of suspending Robert's rules in order to ratify the rules that were made in closed session? Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, sorry about that, folks. So now do you vote to ratify what was voted on in closed session?
Actually, I wouldn't mind notwithstanding this and not ratifying an open session. It's particularly an important point, and the less information we make public about the multi-million-dollar lawsuit, the better. I'm doing this purely defensively, but that's just the recommendation that I would like to make. Because we'd have to notwithstand various regulations, maybe.
Okay, yeah, requiring the forklifts?
Yeah,
Michael?
no, 2/3.
2/3, yeah. Michael?
I was actually going to say the same thing as Ben. I definitely think that this is too sensitive of an issue to have known to the people who are the subject of this issue, and without having to give any additional information. It may hurt us in the future if the subjects of our previous discussion in closed session were to find out of what happened in closed session. So for that reason, I would oppose ratifying it in open session. Just for now, once everything is done, then we can visit this back later.
Okay, sure, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, my apologies for missing a procedural step on what is, in fact, I agree, a very important step. Ben, then what were you proposing?
If I may just speak freely, I can't find the regulation right now. Yeah.
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 Okay, so I motion that we notwithstand standing regulation 56 that requires us to ratify motions passed in closed session, in open session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just say something? Speaking rights. In past years, what they did was they would pick, because there's lots of things we do in closed sessions. You should ratify the appointments to JB. But in past years, what they would do was pick the specific agenda point and ratify everything else and say have that one distributed in a separate document only to the executive. Or else I can't give it to anyone.
Okay. That's regarding to
What they're
what's
trying to
going to happen. Okay, sure. Yeah, Michael?
I'd like the secretary's motion and make an amendment.
Okay, so the seconded, and so you first on speaker's list then for amendment?
Yeah. So I move to amend to approve the appointments to JB and leave everything else that was discussed in closed session unopened. I guess. I don't really know how to word it. I'm sorry. How did you word it again?
Have it distributed in a separate document to the executive was how we did it last year.
What she said.
Okay. Is that a friendly amendment? Does anyone oppose that? Okay, so
I'm sorry, I'm becoming like Paul.
yeah, that's taken as friendly.
It's a culture.
Yeah, sure. So the repeating of the motion is
Yeah, it was the move to notwithstand, what was the standing regulation?
56.
56, and then Michael moved to amend it to approve the appointments to JV and leave everything else discussed in closed session unopened and have it distributed in a separate document to the executive.
okay. So if there's no further discussion on the point, all those in favor of the notwithstanding, with the placards? Opposed? Abstentions?
Oh my god.
Okay, that carries. And again, my apologies for the procedural hiccup. So that brings us back to announcements. Are there any further announcements?
I move to go back into Robert's rules.
Oh, they were suspended for that, for the vote, for the duration of the vote? Okay, great. So is there a second? Okay, so the vote to reinstall Robert's rules. Opposed? Abstentions? Great, Robert's rules are now reinstated, which brings us to the point of announcements.
I believe we forgot to start off the meeting by recognizing that Ron and Susan are on territory.
Yes, we did, and it's actually the second meeting in a row that that's the case. Yeah, thank you.
Just like to mention that next week the external meeting with the Mod Squad is going to be meeting it's next Wednesday at 6 p.m. We're going to start a push for a protest that's being organized between Florida students at the CSU, the other members of this coalition that I talked about during the position, so medical students, students in Sherbrooke, as well as other student associations that are not part of the coalition yet but have expressed interest. So we're trying to mobilize people to come out to a demonstration at Bethune Square on November 15th, and we're going to have quite a lot of material ready. But we're looking for help if people are in departmental associations or faculty associations and would like to really help promote and spread the word. We have quite a lot of mobilization material, and we're going to be doing a huge push over the next month and a half to get as many people out as possible and to try to really make this a gigantic demo. This is actually the first climate justice demo led by students, from what I recall, and when I looked into history can make this a really big one. It's going to be pretty good for the climate justice movement in Quebec. And it's specifically targeted towards fossil fuel projects and the Plan Nord mining project that's going to increase Quebec's overall greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, so if anybody is interested in that, meets next Wednesday, you can speak to me in person. I can give you a stack of posters, flyers, and then also a lot of social media material that you can post on your group's Facebook page. So thanks.
Thank you.
Sir? Yeah, I just had a quick announcement to make about the Concordia Student Congress. The second annual Concordia Student Congress will be taking place on November 20th between 3 and 8 p.m. You'll be hearing a lot more about it in the near future, but I plan on making rounds to several different faculty associations and speaking with many executives at all levels of Concordia student democratic structures, and I just want to let everyone know to mark your calendars. It's November 20th. It will be happening, I think, in this room, so look forward to that.
Thank you. Okay, a few people on the speakers list then, starting with Charles and then John.
Hi, okay, so we announced our next speaker. This is the speaker series earlier this week. If you haven't heard by now, it's Glenn Greenwald. Tickets are $5 to $10 sliding scale. All of the ticket proceeds will be donated to the Freedom of the Press Foundation. You can pick up tickets at the CSU office. The CSU up there if possible.
John, I'm going to try and respect gender parity. Can I have Lucy go first?
This is actually maybe, I'm not doing this, this is like Charles and stuff, but it's something I'm really excited about. There's going to be an exhibition, I guess, of banners from the Tectonic Ave in the EV on next week. It's a curated artifact from the Tectonic Ave. I think it's going to be there like all week from the 12th to the 18th. The artists will be there on the Tuesday and the Friday from noon to 2. It looks really good, and it's accessible, it's on campus, so yeah.
Tom?
I have a question for you that I hope isn't too out of order. But there was one thing on the agenda that was called student space. Did that get taken off?
It wasn't taken off. At the beginning of the meeting, I had said that it was deferred to the Clubs and Space Committee.
I arrived late, so I missed that.
No, that's fine, yeah. Next on the agenda, I had Anthony.
Yeah, I forgot to make another announcement, is that it's November 7th, 8th, and 9th, Concordia, the CSU and the SSMU are going to be hosting the first divestment convergence. So it's pan-Canadian. We're going to have people coming from across Canada that are working on divestment campaigns. And it's going to be 3 days. It's going to start with panel discussions on the open at night. We have people coming, Crystal Lehman, Heather Milton Lightning, and we might have any new elder to speak about the opposition to the Plan Nord up north. But then the rest of the weekend, we're going to have workshops and roundtable discussions on everything from climate change and divestment. It's going to be bilingual as well. But on the Sunday, there's going to be a roundtable of Quebec student associations. So we're inviting student associations from across Quebec, different faculties, and CEGEPs as well, to have a roundtable discussion on how to proceed on climate change. So we're going to be sending out an invite to all of the student associations in at Concordia. And whoever wants to participate, to take part of this discussion, to come up with a game plan, to try to coordinate our efforts to ask for more to be done within the university system on climate change, and also how we can work together outside the university to stop these fossil fuel projects. You are welcome to come to this event, and I'll have a lot more details coming up soon, and we'll be sending out an email to all councils.
Thank you. I had Paul and then Ben.
I had a thing that I want to ask in the question period.
I mean, it's past question period. Is it very pertinent?
Yeah.
Okay, please be brief.
I was just wondering what the situation is on by-elections. Because it's going to be a long discussion next week.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
What the situation is for by-elections, because it's going to be a topic to be discussed in 2 weeks. So I might as well get some information about it now.
If somebody wants to quickly respond to that, that's fine, but I can't create a conversation about this subject, which could potentially be big in announcements.
Again, you went by question period pretty quickly, and I didn't really get a chance to break that down. So,
Does somebody want to quickly respond Ben?
Essentially, in my opinion, it was extremely unlikely before today that we would have them. There's 2 resignations today, so obviously the chances of having them increase, but it still remains council's decision, of course. The next meeting is pretty much the deadline, outside of orthodox kind of behavior. Unorthodox, well, not unorthodox. Anyways, the next meeting is more or less the deadline. Unless somebody wants to call a special council meeting, there might be an opportunity to have them that. But so far we have 25 councillors, and there's no legal requirement for us to hold one currently. This segues nicely into my next point as well, actually. My announcement. Is that a satisfactory answer? Or?
Yeah, it's just to start, if anybody wants to start a discussion about it. Yeah, it's a good answer. Thank you.
Point of information, actually. If anybody else resigns from council, would we be forced to have a by-election? No. Yeah. Okay. So it's not.
Ben, I had you next on speaker list.
Yeah, very topical. The audit is going to be made available to everybody at the next meeting. It will be available for that time. It's yeah, you'll see how it goes. There's a bit of a deficit from last year, which might partially explain the lack of cash flow at the end of our mandate.
Thank you. Randy, I had you raising your placard.
Yeah, just because the standing regulations or in the bylaws, it says that if you want to put a referendum questions, you have to show your question to council first. So I think is it too late to ask a question? Because I mean, you're going to have to get this, we'll have to show the question to council for next meeting, but we'll need to get the signatures and stuff.
Ben, are you directly responding to that?
I will. It may be too late, I'm not sure. 1 second.
If worse comes to worse, could we schedule an emergency a special council meeting for the next week? If we really have to, we could.
Friday.
Yeah. Okay, so timing isn't really an issue then.
There's nothing preventing the calling of a special council.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It may be too late. However, there's nothing stopping council from putting a question on the ballot. I mean, it might be too late, but there's nothing stopping council from putting a question on the ballot if it's suitable.
I just have a question. Let's say that an other GMSB councilor happens to basically resign, or that basically Terry resigns. That means that basically, technically, if that does happen, we would basically have 2/3 of kind of like basically GMSB council seats empty, and basically like independent council being empty. Like, would it force us to make by-elections, legally speaking?
No.
Your response?
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure not. Definitely not if the JMSB seats are 2/3. Anyways, legally is the word that we're using here, but
Yeah, I don't have yeah. It's only for the entire faculty, or 1/4 of the seats. It's in the standing regulations. It's like in book 6 or book 7. It stipulates exactly what conditions need to be satisfied.
I'll also call a point of order. This is announcements.
Yes, well, I was going to say, let's
Okay.
contextualize our points of information by appreciating that we're in the announcement period right now.
Oh, I gotta ask this question.
Well, yeah, thank you. Sarah.
Am I next on speed?
I had no one left on speaker
Okay,
list.
can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting if no one else is there?
Sure, there's a motion to adjourn. Is that seconded? Okay. Motion to adjourn the meeting then? All those in favor?
Oh, well done.
Really well done.
it's not that.
4.5 hours?
I thought it was a good minute.
That's
It's better than Casa BOD, that's for sure.
Committee system, that's